Okay, so today we're looking at some really interesting stuff.
Yeah.
You brought us this story about Mumun,
Yes.
and it's a legend, right?
This is a legend.
About this figure haunting a kampung in Indonesia.
Right. And a kampung, just for anyone who may not know, is sort of like a village or a very close-knit community.
Right. Very rooted in tradition.
Yes, exactly.
So we have, we're working with excerpts from this interview. It's on YouTube.
Okay.
The channel's called Lentera Malam.
I see.
And it's this woman, Dinda, sharing her experiences. And it's giving very much like real-life ghost story vibes, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
Like this is going to be good.
I think people will really like this one. What's so interesting to me about Dinda's story is how it really brings together like personal experience.
Right.
With generations of Indonesian folklore, right?
Yeah.
Like this isn't just like one woman's kind of fear.
Right.
This is like a window into how maybe a whole community sees the world.
It's like these stories become their reality.
Yeah.
And Dinda, she describes this first encounter with Mumun back in 2009.
Okay.
And she says she sees her in broad daylight.
Wow.
Like clear as day, long hair, white dress.
Oh, wow.
Horrifying expression, like the whole 9 yards.
Yeah.
This wasn't a glimpse in the shadows. She saw her.
It was a full-on sighting.
Yes.
And that's where I think this setting of the kampung becomes even more important.
Right.
Because in these communities, belief in the supernatural, it's not a fringe thing. It's not taboo. These are very deeply ingrained beliefs, these stories, like Mumun's.
Mm-hmm.
They're not just campfire tales, you know what I mean? They're woven into the fabric of their lives.
Yeah, it's like they offer this framework for understanding like the world around them.
Right.
And she tries to film this, by the way. She tries to get this encounter on video.
Wow.
And the footage just cuts out.
No way.
Yeah, and then after seeing Mumun, she gets sick.
Oh, no.
So it's like something straight out of a horror movie.
It really is. It's like the experience itself, whatever it was, kind of took a physical toll.
Yeah.
Like it was just too much to handle.
Yeah, and you know, this is her experience, and then we're introduced to her grandfather, Abba. And he seems totally fine with Mumun.
Right.
Even jokes she's his girlfriend. Is he serious? I don't know. It's like, what's going on there?
Well, and that's such an interesting detail to me, because I think what it highlights is the way different generations
Right.
might interact with the same stories.
Right.
So someone like Abba, who, who knows how long he's lived in this community, he's grown up with these tales.
Right.
His relationship to them might be totally different. It might not be fear. It might be familiarity. It might even be a kind of respect,
It makes me think about how some cultures view their ancestors. It's not with terror, it's with reverence.
Totally.
It's like these beliefs are just part of their worldview.
Exactly.
And then she shares the story about Abba saying, oh, I took Mumun out for sat.
He took a spirit out to dinner.
Right.
I need to hear more about this.
Satay, for people listening who don't know, it's that Indonesian dish.
Yes, very popular.
Yes, and the best part, the tukang satay, like the vendor,
Right.
confirms this.
No.
He's like, yeah, this guy, matching Abba's description,
Wow.
comes in late at night with this beautiful woman.
Oh, my gosh.
But the next morning, the money, it's all leaves.
Classic.
It's like right out of, a folklore, like anthology.
Well, right, like that's a trope, that's the classic, that's the,
Speaking of specific locations, there's this haunted schoolhouse she mentions. Her mother ran a PIGUD, which is basically an early childhood education center.
Okay.
And there were these two guys who helped out there, Adi and Oven.
Okay.
And they had really, really creepy encounters.
And this is interesting to me, too, because it reinforces this idea that, like, Mumun is not just like a fleeting apparition,
Right.
Like her influence is tangible.
Right.
So eerie, he describes meeting this, like, stunningly beautiful woman, but only at night and only in the bathroom of the schoolhouse. Irin, on the other hand, he sees this terrifying figure dressed in green.
See, that figure in green, immediately I think some folklore surrounding like female spirits, especially with what we find out later, like around childbirth. It's like, there's something more to this figure. It's something ancient and powerful. But I'm getting ahead.
You're right. And it's so interesting, those symbols.
Yeah.
You pointed out. The green, the fact that she's female, all of that, like that's ripe,
Yes.
But to your point, both of these men, they're so freaked out by these encounters that they actually quit.
Wow.
They quit their jobs.
Right.
They are out of there.
It makes you wonder what they saw. Like, what was it that made them react so strongly?
Right. Was it just a figure? Or was it something more?
And it's so interesting how all of this seems to cluster around this one area, the schoolhouse, a particular tree, and then, like, the village office.
Right, this idea that a spirit has a territory.
Yes.
It's so common in folklore.
Right.
It's like she's not just, like a free-floating entity.
Right.
She has a domain
Yes.
where she's most powerful.
It's like her presence is tied to the land, to that specific place.
Yes.
And that brings us to an even more, I think, like a personal aspect of this whole thing, Dinda's experience with motherhood.
Oh, absolutely. And this is where I think it gets really juicy because you have motherhood, childbirth, the supernatural. These things are so often intertwined in folklore across cultures.
Right.
And I think that Dinda's experiences really tap into some of those very, very, very old anxieties.
Yeah. Like around the births of her first 2 kids, she mentions seeing the figure in green again.
Oh, gosh.
She has difficult labor.
Right.
And there's this recurring theme of blood, which, let's be honest, is creepy.
Well, yeah. And I think the blood especially, it's interesting. The green, the difficult birth, the blood.
Yeah.
All of these kind of tie into this very potent kind of a set of symbols that we see associated with female spirits and the anxieties around childbirth.
It's like she's tapping into something primal, like something deep in our minds.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where I think as the story unfolds, it gets even more creepy.
Because just when you think it can't get any weirder, she starts hearing these whispers.
Oh, no. Tell me more about the whispers.
And these aren't your average whispers.
Okay.
These are like almost urging her to do something
Like what?
that could cause harm. This is where it goes from spooky to like, oh, this is not good.
Right, right. This is where the line between Dinda and Mumun's story starts to get really blurry.
Because she hears this phrase, she hears, make them feel your pain. And at first she's like, no, that's crazy, right?
Yeah.
But then all these awful things start happening to her ex-husband and his new partners.
Oh my gosh, no.
Yeah.
Like what kinds of things are we talking?
So he gets arrested. There's a car crash. And then the people around him are accusing Dinda of sending Mumun after them.
Oh, wow. Okay, so hold on. Is it that she, like, consciously unleashed something?
Right.
Or is this just a string of really bad luck that's being interpreted through this lens of Mumun?
Right, exactly. Is this free will?
Yeah, what is going on?
Supernatural influence, just bad luck. It's like, what do we do with that?
That's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
And I think particularly for the people living within this community and this belief system, like how much of what we perceive as reality is actually shaped by what we believe, especially when it comes to the supernatural.
It really makes you think. There's a lot to untack here.
Oh my gosh. We're just scratching the surface. There's so much more to this story.
Okay, so we've got Dinda, who she's trying to reason through this. She's tried to get evidence, and now she's had these things happen. What does she do? Does she just resign herself to this?
Well, and that's what's so interesting. This is where Dinda's story takes, another turn. Because in 2023, so now we're fast forwarding a bit, she and her current husband are, kind of at a low point.
Right.
They're struggling, emotionally, financially. They've tried everything they can think of, and nothing seems to be working.
It's heartbreaking, honestly, when you think about what they must have been going through, that feeling of helplessness.
Absolutely. But it's interesting because in that moment of really, really intense vulnerability,
right,
they find solace, not in rituals, not in anything external, but in themselves and their faith. Dinda talks about finding this incredible source of strength through prayer, through connecting with, a higher power on her own terms,
That's really beautiful, actually. It's like, this isn't even, it's about so much more than these encounters, It's about resilience.
Right.
It's about finding that inner strength when faced with fear.
I think that's such a good point, and especially in the context of a story that up to this point has really been about this kind of like fear of the unknown.
Right.
And the fact that there's this turn
Yes.
towards this kind of like really beautiful internal source of strength is super powerful.
Yeah, and it's like, how they say when you hit rock bottom, the only way is up.
Totally.
That's kind of what it seems like. This way out, this way up from under, everything that's been hanging over her. But this is a deep dive into Mumun, so it can't be that easy.
It's never that easy. What happens?
Right. You said it. When it comes to the supernatural, it's never that simple.
Never that simple.
Yeah.
So what happens next?
So that tree, the Huna tree we talked about,
Yes.
that Dinda would always sit under.
Right.
Everyone said that was her domain.
Right.
It's gone. They cut it down in 2023.
They cut the tree down.
Yes.
Why? What happened?
Well, shortly after that, Dinda gets really sick.
No.
Yeah, and this isn't like, oh, I have a cold.
Right.
No, no, no. This is like she's describing these physical symptoms.
Wow.
Pain.
Okay.
Doctors can't figure out what's wrong.
Oh, that's really creepy.
So I have to ask, right?
Yeah.
If that tree was like her anchor to this world.
Right.
You cut it down, what happens?
Right. Where does she go?
Right. What happens to her?
What happens to her power?
Exactly. And that's what I love about this part of the story, right?
Okay.
You could take it a couple of different ways. Some people might say, well, her power is gone.
Right.
It's severed.
Right. Like she's cut off.
But knowing these stories, I don't think it's that easy.
You're right. It's not that simple.
Right.
There's another interpretation, and it's a little darker, that I think maybe Dinda even leans towards.
Let me guess. She thinks it's Mumun, but like angrier than ever.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Dinda talks about how it feels like Mumun's presence, if anything, it's gotten stronger.
Oh, wow.
Like she's searching for something or someone.
Right.
It's like they've unleashed something by cutting this tree down that is way less predictable and way more volatile.
Oh, that's giving me chills. So what do we make of all of this?
Well, I think we're back to our earlier question, right? This question of how much our beliefs shape our realities.
Right.
Because, was Dinda sick because of the tree? Or was it this deep-seated fear and belief in Mumun that manifested in a physical way?
It's like that line between the supernatural and the psychosomatic. It's blurred completely.
And the question then I think becomes, if you believe in something strongly enough,
Right.
can you will it into being?
It's a great question. I mean, people have been debating this for centuries, I'm sure, but it's really at play in Dinda's story.
Totally.
And what's so amazing to me throughout all of this is how this one story, this one legend can hold so much.
It's so true. I mean, on the surface, it's a ghost story, right?
Right.
It's a haunting, But when you start to kind of like peel back the layers,
Yes.
you see themes of family, of tradition, of faith, the power of belief. It's all there.
And the ending, it's not tied up in this neat little bow, which I think makes it better.
Me too.
Yeah.
I agree. Because it leaves us with this feeling, right, of like, I don't know, kind of little unsettled.
Unsettled, yeah.
Like, did something happen?
Yes.
Did they disrupt something?
Right. By cutting the tree down, did they release something else?
Did they make it worse?
Right. It's just, we're left with more questions. And you know what? I kind of like that.
Me too. And I think ultimately that makes for such a more kind of thought-provoking deep dive. Because this wasn't about whether or not Mumun was real. It was about how belief shapes our understanding of the world. And especially when faced with things that we don't understand.
Absolutely. Well said. It seems like, for every answer, there's like 2 more questions.
Always, yeah.
And you know what? I wouldn't have it any other way.
Me neither. It's those unanswered questions that keep us curious, right? Keep us coming back for more.
Exactly. This has been quite a journey. But for anyone listening, if you ever find yourself face to face with a legend like Mumun, remember sometimes the most interesting truth, it's not found in those concrete answers.
Totally.
But it's in those spaces between what we believe and what we experience.
Love it.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep asking those questions, and as always, keep diving deep. So we left off with Dinda hearing these creepy whispers.
Right.
And then her ex and the people around him start having all these awful things happen.
Yeah.
She must be freaking out at this point.
Oh, absolutely.
Who would you even talk to about this?
Right. And it's so easy for us to sit here and go, well, I wouldn't believe that.
Right.
But like, imagine, being in that community, those stories are so ingrained in their lives.
Yeah, like how do you even separate your experience from that?
Exactly. And so that's what I think is so interesting about what Dinda does next. She goes to the Eustaces.
And remind me, the Ustas, they are.
Oh, right. So they're Islamic religious scholars,
Okay.
often sought out for their, spiritual guidance, healing.
So it makes sense. If you're dealing with something you think is supernatural,
Right.
you go to someone who understands that realm.
Absolutely. And I think that's something we see across cultures, right?
Right.
This idea that when people are dealing with things that they don't understand, they often turn to religious leaders to be these kind of intermediaries
Yes.
to a world that they don't understand.
Okay, so what happens when she goes to them? Do they just blow her off?
No, they actually perform a ruqya on her.
A ruqya. Okay, break that down.
Yeah, so ruqya is this like really intense spiritual healing session.
Okay.
It often involves prayers and verses from religious texts. and it can be seen as kind of like a cleansing or an exorcism.
Wow, okay. So what does she say about it? What was that like?
She describes it as this incredibly intense experience and actually talks about it as this like out-of-body experience.
Oh, wow.
Like she felt this separation from herself, from her body.
So is that real? Or is that just in her head?
That's a question for the ages, isn't it?
Right.
I mean, is it a genuine spiritual experience?
Yeah.
Is it the power of suggestion?
Right.
Is it some kind of like altered state of consciousness? I don't know.
Well, either way, I bet it was intense.
Oh, yeah.
But did it work?
Well, that's the thing.
Uh-oh.
Even after the Ruqya, the strange events in Dinda's life, they continue.
So it's like instead of getting rid of it, they just made it mad or something.
Well, that's the thing about folklore, right?
Yeah.
This idea that if you confront the supernatural head on, even with good intentions, sometimes there are unintended consequences.
That's like opening a door you can't close.
Right. And I think, it all goes back to this idea of belief shaping reality. Because remember, we're seeing all of this through the lens of Dinda's experiences.
Right.
And so it's a good reminder that our beliefs, whether we're conscious of them or not, they really do shape how we move through the world,
Okay, so we have Dinda. She's tried to reason through this. She's tried to get proof. She's gone to religious scholars, and it's still happening.
Right.
What happens next?
Well, and this is where Dinda's story, it takes another turn. Because in 2023, Dinda and her current husband, they're really struggling.
Okay.
Emotionally, financially, they're at a low point. They've tried everything, and nothing's working.
Man, that's got to be so hard,
Absolutely.
to feel that helpless.
Absolutely. But here's the interesting thing. In that moment of vulnerability, they find solace.
Okay.
But not in rituals.
Right.
Not in kind of like, these external forces, but in themselves, in their faith.
Wow.
And Dinda talks about finding this incredible strength through prayer, through connecting with a higher power.
That's actually really beautiful. It's like this whole story, it's more than just these scary events.
Right.
It's about resilience and finding strength in the face of fear.
And I think that's such a great point. And I think that's such a powerful kind of, message, especially in the context of a story that's so much about fear,
Right. Like when they say, you hit rock bottom, the only way is up.
Exactly. And that's what it seems like for Dinda.
Yeah.
This way out. Yeah. This way up from under this darkness.
But this is Moon. It can't be that easy, right?
It's never that easy.
Of course not.
It's never that easy with the supernatural, is it?
No. So what happens?
So that huni tree, remember that massive tree?
Yes, the one she would sit under.
Yes.
That everyone said was like Mumun's domain.
Yes. That one, it's gone.
Okay.
They cut it down in 2023.
They cut down the tree. Why? What happened?
Well, shortly after they cut the tree down, Dinda gets really, really sick.
No way. Are you saying that because they cut the tree down, she got sick?
Well, I mean, it's impossible to say for sure.
Right.
But the timing it's awfully suspicious, don't you think?
Suspicious is an understatement. Okay, tell me everything. So the tree is gone and Dinda is suddenly sick, like really sick.
Yeah, this is serious stuff we're talking about.
More than just a cold, right?
Oh, yeah. She's describing like real physical symptoms, debilitating pain.
Wow.
And the doctors, they can't figure out what's wrong with her and no diagnosis.
See, that's what makes this whole Mumun's domain thing really creepy.
Right.
Like, if that tree was her connection to this world.
Yeah.
What happens when it's gone?
Right. Where does she go?
Wow.
What happens to her power?
It's like they unleashed something maybe by cutting it down.
It's a good question. And it's one that I think hangs over this entire part of the story.
Right.
So some people might hear this and think, okay, Mumun's power is gone.
Right.
She's cut off from the physical world. Like, that connection is severed.
But I have a feeling it's not that simple.
You're right. It's not that simple at all.
Knowing these stories, there's always another layer.
Right. There is another interpretation. And it's a little darker.
Okay, hit me with it.
And Dinda even seems to think that this might be the case.
She thinks Mumun's angry.
Furious, maybe even.
Yeah, because they messed with her tree.
She describes it as Mumun's presence getting stronger.
Oh, wow.
Like she's searching for something or someone.
It's so creepy.
It's like they disrupted some kind of balance.
Yeah.
And now they're dealing with the consequences.
What do we make of all this?
It's tough to say for sure, but I think we keep coming back to this idea of belief shaping reality.
Right.
Was Dinda physically ill because the tree was cut down?
Right.
Or was it her fear? Was it her belief in Mumun that manifested in this physical way?
Like that line is just completely blurred
Yeah.
between what's supernatural and what's in your head.
And isn't that what's so fascinating about these stories?
Right.
This idea that what we believe can have a real impact on our lives.
Absolutely. And Dinda's story really highlights that tension, doesn't it?
It does, and I think that's one of the things that makes it so compelling.
Yeah. You know what I love about this whole thing?
What's that?
This isn't just some straightforward ghost story.
No, not at all.
It's about family tradition, faith, the power of belief.
And it's about Dinda's journey,
Mm-hmm.
her search for answers and understanding.
It's like every answer leads to more questions.
Always more questions, and I think that's a good thing.
Me too. It
Yeah.
keeps us thinking, keeps us engaged.
Exactly, and that's what a good story should do, right?
Exactly. Well said. So here we are at the end of another deep dive.
Another one down.
And you know what I have to say? This one really stuck with me.
Me too. It's those kinds of stories that really get under your skin.
It makes you think about the world a little differently.
For sure. And it reminds us that sometimes the most fascinating truths,
Yeah.
they aren't found in black and white answers, but in that space between what we believe and what we experience.
I love that. And with that thought, listeners, we're going to leave you to ponder.
Keep those questions coming.
Keep exploring those gray areas. And as always, keep diving deep.